Madam President.
Senator from Texas.
Madam President, I thank my friend from Oregon for his impassioned comments. I would note for the record a few things that he did not say. My friend from Oregon chose not to say a word about the fact that Lois Lerner, a senior IRS official, has twice pleaded the Fifth in front of the House of Representatives. To that, he had not a single response. My friend from Oregon chose to say not a word to the fact that the IRS singled out Senator Chuck Grassley for special scrutiny. To that, he said not a word. My friend from Oregon chose to say not a word to the fact that the IRS has now admitted to illegally handing over private personal information from a citizen group to its political opponents for partisan political purposes, and has paid a $50,000 fine. Madam President, that is not an allegation. That is not a theory. That is what the IRS has admitted and paid a $50,000 fine with taxpayer funds. And yet I'm sorry to say my friend from Oregon had not a word to say about that abuse of power. I mentioned before that from the Democratic members of this chamber, when it comes to the abuse of power from the Obama administration, there are crickets chirping. Now, I'm pleased that my friend from Oregon and the Finance Committee has engaged in an investigation of what occurred. We don't know what that investigation will conclude. But I find it interesting that he said it's premature for a special prosecutor. 14 months ago was when President Obama said, "I am angry and the American people have a right to be angry." 14 months ago. 14 months, not a single person's been indicted. 14 months, most of the victims haven't been interviewed. 14 months, they publicly announced they don't intend to indict anyone. And yet it's premature. If the American people had a right to be angry 14 months ago, which is what President Obama told us, what should we feel 14 months later after partisan stonewalling and obstruction of justice? If the American people had a right to be angry, I would note a Senate committee is conducting an investigation and will issue a report. But yet the Senate committee can't indict anyone. The Senate committee can't prosecute anyone. My friend from Oregon says it's premature to have a special prosecutor because apparently holding people who break the laws, who commit criminal conduct to abuse IRS power to target individual citizens based on their political views, apparently holding them accountable, is not a priority for a single Democratic member of this chamber. That saddens me, Madam President. It saddens me that we don't have 100 senators in this room saying, regardless of what party we're in, it is an embarrassment to have this investigation, and I put that word in quotes, because a real investigation involves interviewing the victims. A real investigation involves following the evidence where it lies. And I would note that my friend from Oregon, in describing the Senate committee's investigation, mentioned that they interviewed some IRS employees, but noticeably absent from who he said they interviewed was anyone in the White House. Anyone political. Apparently they were not interviewed. We don't know. But he didn't mention them if they were. It is an embarrassment that this so-called investigation is led by a partisan Democratic donor who's given over $6,000 to President Obama and the Democrats. It is an embarrassment that the IRS obstruction of justice is led by a major Democratic donor who's given nearly $100,000. Every one of us takes an oath to the Constitution. Every one of us owes fidelity to rule of law. And when you have the Department of Justice behaving like an arm of the DNC, protecting the political interests of the White House instead of upholding the law, It undermines the liberty of every American. I am saddened that Democratic members of this chamber will not stand up and say, I have a higher obligation to the Constitution, to the rule of law, to the American people than I have to my Democratic Party. That is the sad state of affairs, but it is also a state of affairs that is outraging the American people, that is waking up the American people. You know, President Obama had it right when he said 14 months ago, the American people are right to be angry about this. He was correct. And when elected officials, when appointed officials in the Obama administration mock the rule of law, demonstrate contempt for Congress, and abuse their power against the individual citizenry, against we the people have a natural and immediate remedy that is available in November every 2 years. This November, I am confident that the American people will follow the President's advice and demonstrate that they are angry about the abuse of power and even angrier about the partisan cover-up in which all 55 Democratic senators have actively aided and abetting. If Attorney General Eric Holder is unwilling to appoint a special prosecutor, if he insists on keeping this prosecution in the control of a major Obama donor, then Attorney General Eric Holder should be impeached, because the rule of law matters more than any partisan political party. Thank you, Madam President.